Ripple, the global real-time settlement network. Consumers and businesses have new and increasing demands for cross-border payments. Ripple connects banks around the world and allows them to offer real-time cross-border payment services to their customers. Currently, cross-border transactions require many intermediaries to execute, so settlement takes multiple days. This often creates costs and risks that make it difficult to meet today's market demands. Ripple enables cross-border payments to execute directly between banks within seconds and provides the banks end-to-end visibility throughout the whole process. Ripple is infrastructure technology banks can adopt to power new payment services like low-value retail and corporate payments. Let's see Ripple in action, enabling a person-to-person remittance use case. On the right-hand side, you see a bank's mobile app. On the left-hand side, you see Ripple powering the core processes to execute a cross-border payment. Alice, a bank customer in the U.S., logs into her mobile banking app. Her bank uses Ripple for cross-border payments. She wants to send money to Bob, who lives in Singapore. Bob's bank also uses Ripple. When Alice selects Bob as the recipient, Ripple allows her bank and Bob's bank to exchange sender and recipient information to meet risk and compliance requirements. This information is encrypted and exchanged directly between banks via HTTPS. No customer information ever touches the Ripple network. Alice wants to send $1,000 to Bob. Ripple queries the banks for their fees and the network for a real-time FX quote. Ripple packages this information to show Alice the total cost of her payment to Bob in Singapore. Thanks to Ripple, banks can provide customers an accurate total cost, delivery time, and delivery amount for cross-border payments, down to the cent, before the payment executes. After Alice approves the payment, settlement takes place over Ripple in 5 to 10 seconds. Simultaneously, Ripple triggers Alice's bank and Bob's bank to update their ledgers. As soon as the funds are posted into Bob's account, Alice is notified. Ripple solutions afford banks access to transact directly, speed transaction settlement to real time, trace funds end-to-end with certainty of delivery, and minimize the total cost of every transaction. With Ripple, banks around the world are already developing new payment products and services for real-time cross-border transactions. To learn more, please contact us at ripple.com.
So, you guys can see here from the video how Ripple is meant to work. So Ripple is actually the company that developed Ripple, the digital currency or network, is called Ripple, and it's actually funded by a lot of banks. And if you've heard that before, but here's where I'll show you that. Now, the Ripple as a network, RippleNet and Ripple, the currency, and the company that developed all of this, they're targeting banks. They're actually trying to make transactions between banks and these institutions, this entire ecosystem that currently exists, to function at a lower cost and faster, maintaining the current third-party institutions that other cryptocurrencies like Ethereum, Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dash, and so on, especially Bitcoin being the first, we're actually trying to eliminate by cryptographically securing your data, your digital currency, and creating trust on the network between you and person X or institution Y. This currency actually is not a cryptocurrency. It's meant to enable the same system to actually move forward and grow. And as you can see here from the video that you've just watched on their website, if you want to send funds to somebody you know, or you want to pay for something that is cross-border, you have to right now go through a long process between the banks to pay for things. So you're still using your current local currency, but that gets changed to Ripple when it comes to the banks sending your funds. And the banks are the ones benefiting, not you. You're not benefiting from this because you're paying still fees and exchanges between your currency, Ripple, and to their currency that they will use locally. You're not going to be allowed to walk around and pay for things using Ripple. It's not for you. So the access, the speed, the certainty, and cost is really for the banks. Because right now there's intermediary banks and investment banks and a lot of banks that do certain things that your local bank can't do. So they have 100 customers, and among them, here in Canada, you can recognize RBC and BMO as being the top banks here in Canada. BMO is actually an intermediary bank in Canada. So if you're sending funds from abroad into Canada or within Canada to abroad, and you're an RBC customer, your funds are actually going to go through BMO and then to another bank somewhere else, and so on until it reaches the bank where that person you're sending funds to has an account with and deals with these intermediary banks. So this company offers through the RepoNet certain solutions to tackle the different areas within the current ecosystem. Whether it's xCurrent, where banks use it to process global payments for their customers. For example, like online, instead of using Moneris at a store, you use xCurrent, xRapid for liquidity, basically credit cards. XVIA, businesses use XVIA to plug into the RippleNet to send payments. So, for example, you are GM and you are buying a lot of resources or materials from another huge institution or company in a different country. You can use XVIA to access the RippleNet and send that Ripple to that company, which using banks gets changed to the local currency. So as consumers, you really aren't going to be able to use Ripple. So let's say you bought Ripple. You're like, oh, I have it from the exchange. Well, guess what? Here is a little bit, you need to understand the difference between Bitcoin and Ripple, for example. Ripple, in terms of ownership, is actually owned and operated by Ripple, the company. No one owns Bitcoin. When you have it in your wallet, you own it, but they actually do. And you can do a little bit of research on this. Ripple can account, or your Ripple funds can be frozen. And it's really meant to be used for institutions. So yes, you can own it right now, and they will let you own it. But when it comes to usability, where is it going to go? It's really not something that you can, that I see personally going to replace Bitcoin. It's meant to, maybe eventually, if we do away with all fiat national currencies and you end up with just Ripple and banks are still there, that's the whole point. Then what? It will all be using one digital currency across the globe, which is interesting. It would be best that it's Bitcoin, but because it's decentralized. But this seems to be a very it just brings the current system in competition with free market solutions like Bitcoin. And you can see all these institutions that are getting into this space, and transactions are validated by validators. So what are those? Now we're going to look into that. And so how to run a validator. So reasons to run a validator. The robustness of the XRP, which is the abbreviation for the currency Ripple, ledger depends on an interconnected web of validators who each trust a few other validators not to collude. So the more operators with different interests there are who run validators, the more certain each member of the network can be that it continues to run impartially. This is interesting. You see, with Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, you have miners and pools, and these guys validate the transactions, and there's trust in that network. With XRP, you cannot mine it. It's already there. They issued 100 million, I believe, Ripple coins, and that's it. So the transactions have to be validated somehow between banks and institutions. So you can run to be a validator and to verify these transactions, and you contribute to the consensus process. Not all Ripple servers need to be validators. Trusting more servers from the same operator does not offer better protection against collusion. An organization might run validators in multiple regions for redundancy in case of natural disasters or other emergencies. So basically, it's still using the same. So let's say your RBC, you're running a server validating the ledger as RBC. So if you have two servers, you're not doing anything. You're not counted as two validators. You're still one. You just have you're validating the ledger here, and you're just revalidating what you validated here. It's just like keeping a copy. So they tell you what availability is, agreement, votes should match the outcome, and so on, blah, blah, blah. And this is where you can install it. Now, what's the point of all this? You don't earn anything. It's just meant to be something that you run as an institution or as a bank. And you can see here types of Ripple servers. So stock server follows the network with a local copy of the ledger. Validating server or validator of short participates in consensus. And there's standalone mode for, there's one that are standalone for testing. When you're actually participating, there is no, you share the public key with the public, especially the other Ripple operators. When the other Ripple operators add your public key to their list of trusted servers, you've become a trusted validator. So there's no earning opportunity here. Unlike Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies where you can earn by mining and validating transactions. This is more like, oh, you're a customer, you're RBC, you're also a validator, and when you transact with a BMO, they have a server, they're running the software to be a validator, and they have your public key. And so basically your ledgers, when there's transactions happening, your ledgers are matching, and that's the whole thing. That's the whole network. It's just matching to maintain matching transactions without any benefits. Now, yes, you can be a trusted validator, but you can collude here. So if all these banks, and you see them, and we've heard and know that there is evidence of manipulation in the price of silver, what is there in terms of incentive to stop these guys from colluding and manipulating transactions or ledgers? Nothing. And there's no way to prevent them. So they can all come together, sit down and say, hey, we're going to do this. Are you in? Yes. Okay, let's do it. And done. There is nobody verifying that what they're doing is the right thing or not. So I am highly against Ripple because it's not decentralized. It's very centralized. You can run the Ripple validator as a validator on your own server, but you're going to have to go to these institutions and tell them, hey, I'm a validator. Would you like to give me your public key? The most probability is they will tell. It's most highly probable that they will tell you no. Unless you're a big institution, you have one server in a different in some country, and you go around to all these banks and say, hey, we are a trusted validator. We'll make sure we validate things and we run by these code of ethics, but there's no incentive for them to include you on this. There's no, you can't go around and charging them because, well, they can validate themselves among themselves. So if you really understand what I'm trying to say here, you would realize quickly that this is a terrible network, and it's mainly designed for banks to use so they can continue surviving against Bitcoin. I don't see it as something that would grow to be something interesting for everybody else that wants financial freedom. Sorry to put it for you that way. It's just, that's the reality. The use cases are mainly targeted towards banks. They want payment providers, and that's all it is. I don't see it as something that you would benefit from as an individual. So yeah. Anyway, I'll let you go. Enjoy your evening. Thank you.